Morning, everyone. Welcome to CLAD News Brief. And today, this week is the 23rd week of the year. And let's take a look at the interest rate. Well, this week, interest rate went up a little bit. Last week, it was 5.125 for 30-year fixed. And this week, 5.25. And the 15-year went up to 4.25. Last week it was a 4.125, and FHA went up a little bit also because 10-year Treasury yield went up to 2.968 from last week's 2.853. What about 5-year ARM? 4.75, and 7-year ARM 4.875. So this week, in general, interest rate went up a little bit. Well, last 2 weeks, 2 consecutive weeks, actually interest went down, as you can see, from last month to last week. But so we'll have to see the later of this week how the interest rate heading to. Okay, the first news from Korea Daily. Korea News, 중앙일보 reported a news for American Dream Mall, ADM project. Well, according to US report to SEC last week, the owner of this mall, the 555, is facing a default because ADM could not pay the interest of the loans. But currently, ADM has about 800 million of loans, including local government bonds, and they could not pay the interest. It was due on June 1st. And they requested to delay the extension of the due date till 15th, but it doesn't look good. And East Rutherford town could not receive the tax, which could be about $5.5 million. And this mega mall of total 3 million square feet size had an expectation in the beginning of 40 million visitors a year. And also anticipated 1.2 billion worth of economic effects in the beginning. But through the pandemic, it really hit hard. The mall had to experience the loss of $60 million. 우리가 ADM을 가보신 분들도 계실 텐데요. 지금 좀 힘들어하고 있는 상황이라고 론을 빌려주고 있는 US 뱅크가 SEC에 지금 리포트를 했다. 그 빌딩 주인은, 프로젝트 주인은 555 캐나디언 컴퍼니죠. 그래서 지금 현재 부채가 한 800 밀리언 되는데 6월 1일부로 내야 되는 지금 이자를 못 내고 있어서 디폴트 상황이 돼 있다. 그래서 15일까지 연장 신청을 했는데 그래도 아마 페이하기 힘들 것 같다. 이스트 라더포드 타운은 텍스를 받아야 될 게 있는데 한 $5.5 million. 그래서 맨 처음에 이 몰이 한 1년에 한 4천만 명 정도 비지터를 예상을 했고요. 그리고 1.2 빌리언 정도의 그 경제 효과를 예상했는데 지금 팬데믹 지나면서 $60 million loss 손해가 지금 나 있다. 네, 그런 뉴스가 중앙일보 통해서 보고가 됐고요. Next news is from the Record. Today's Record report says the New Jersey housing market shows signs of stabilizing. Well, it sounds kind of good news. Higher mortgage rates and the pain of inflation are slowing the rise in home prices in New Jersey. As increased cost to prompt buyers to tighten their budget. And the local real estate agents said they've seen prices stabilize since the Fed raised interest rate in May. We start the raising interest rate in May. by the most in 22 years. And NJAR, you know this organization, by the way, most of agents are the members of this NJAR, New Jersey Association of Realtors. A report says the median home sales price in Bergen County rose 7.4% in April compared to a year ago. In February, before the Fed's first rate hike of the year, the increase was almost 12%. So with these statistics, because of interest rate rise, the home sales price rose only 7.4%, but before interest rising, the home price increase was 12%, all compared with a year ago. In Passaic County, the sales price climbed 6.1% in April, compared 15.4% in February. So we see the quite difference. And the Compass Real Estate of Richwood, the local brokerage company, the Max Stokes says, the market remains strong with the inventory still low, but is transitioning to a more traditional, normalized market. That's what he said. In Morris County, the rise in home prices were roughly the same in April and February at 4.5% and 4.2%. So depending on the county, depending on locality, the price appreciation is different. We'll see the more nationwide news about the home price increase. Later on, after 2 years of a tight inventory during COVID-19 crisis, more homes are coming onto the market, according to a May report from Realtor.com. We hope so. We need more inventory. 지금 그 레코드지에 오늘 그 뉴스가 하나 보도된 것은 지금 뉴저지의 조금 집들 상황이 좀 안정화돼 가고 있지 않는가, 그런 지금 리포트가 나와 있고요. 그 NJAR에서 리포트한 거로는 버겐 카운티의 4월 달에 집값이 1년 전 대비 7.4%가 이제 보고가 됐는데 4월 달에, 근데 2월 달에는 1년 전 대비 12%가 인크리즈 됐었다. 그러니까 인크리즈 레이트이 지금 드롭하고 있는 거죠. 그래서 지금 안정세를 찾아가고 있지 않느냐, 그런 얘기를 좀 하고 있을 수 있고요. 퍼세이 카운티는 4월 달에 6.1%로 폭이 좁아졌는데 2월 달에는 15.4%가 1년 전 대비 올라갔다. 그렇게 보고 있는 거고요. 그래서 지금 로컬 에이전트들이 조금 그 안정세를 찾아가고 있지 않느냐. 그리고 Realtor.com의 리포트에 의하면 5월 달에 지금 그 COVID-19 크라이시스 때에 굉장히 인벤토리가 타이트했는데 이제 좀 늘어나고 있지 않느냐. 그렇게 지금 Realtor.com이 메이 리포트에 보고를 했다고 합니다. Next news is, it's again local news in the Manhattan. Around Times Square, Hilton Hotel at Times Square is set to reopen after sale. I believe a few weeks ago we reported about Sheraton Hotel, but now as a Hilton Hotel in that region. So 478-room hotel near the heart of New York City's Times Square is poised to reopen under new ownership after closing 2 years ago. The latest sign that investors are betting on the neighborhood's comeback, especially Times Square area. The investment firm Apollo Global Management Inc. and the hospitality investor New Bond Holdings agreed to buy this Hilton Hotel, Times Square, for about $85 million. I believe it's a not bad price. the 478 rooms, you can divide by 85 million divided by 478 rooms. So roughly you can calculate the dollar per room. Usually hotel is a good indicator. And so this deal is expected to close toward the end of summer, and the new ownership plans to reopen the property in the fall. And well, previous owner of this hotel, Sunstone Hotel Investors, defaulted on a loan for the hotel and handed the property over to the lender, Torchlight Investors, in late 2020. So it's a pandemic collapse, basically. Real estate investors are swooping in. That means they rush to buy if the price is right. The hotel owner and operator, MCR, and Iceland Capital Group, LLC, recently paid $373 million for the Sheraton New York Times Square Hotel. I think we reported this a few weeks ago, which was about half the price that the property sold for in 2006. And hotel owners are encouraged by recent forecasts that the city's tourism is in a strong recovery mode. 자, 타임스퀘어에 또 하나 호텔이 이제 준비가 돼서 여름에 지금 클로징하고 가을쯤에 다시 리오픈한다고 그러는데 바로 힐튼 호텔, 힐튼 타임스퀘어 호텔인데 지금 그 인베스터들이 서둘러서 막 이제 사들이고 있는 그런 상황이라는 거죠. 그래서 이 호텔은 2020년도에 참 이 전주인 선스톤 호텔이 이제 디폴트하고 던져버린 거죠. 그거를 지금 85 밀리언에 사서 뉴 오너가 됐죠. 그래서 이제 지금 서머에 클로징하고 가을에는 새로 열 준비를 했다. 그 뉴스 전에 그 쉐라톤도 니어바이 그 쉐라톤 뉴욕 타임스퀘어 호텔도 이제 퍼체스가 돼서 반값에 2006년도 산값의 반값이죠. 373 밀리언, 373 밀리언 주고 사서 이제 준비가 됐다. 그래서 이제 호텔 오너들이 지금 시리의 맨하탄 뉴욕시리 투어리즘이 다시 스트롱한 리커버리 모드가 된다고 하는 포캐스트를 지금 보면서 지금 이런 투자들을 하고 있다. Okay, next news is Wall Street Journal today reported commercial property shows cooling signs. Let's take a look at it. Commercial real estate is showing the first signs of cooling in more than a year, disrupted by rising interest rates that are already causing some deals to collapse. Okay, and in April, property sales were $39.4 billion, was down 16% compared with the same month a year ago. In April, the total sales went down by 16%. And this decline followed the 13 consecutive months of increases, while commercial sector was recovering and the sales was increasing for 13 consecutive months, but now it's a first-time decline. Okay, and well, some analysts are starting to ask whether the commercial rally is rounding out of steam. The hotels, office buildings, the senior housing, and industrial properties recorded big drops in sales last month. I think last week also we reported, for instance, Amazon.com, they're going to sublease possibly up to 30 million square feet warehouse space. So we'll see some change in warehouse space. And this is kind of correlated, this news. Hotel, office buildings, and senior housing and industrial properties shows big drop last month. Okay. 지금 yeah, and also the analysts and the brokers said activity in even these sectors might be slowing as rising interest rates keep some investors from making competitive offers. So the main reason is interest rate. Increasing the interest rate that makes this commercial sales dropping. 지금 월스트리트저널이 오늘 리포트한 것 중에 커머셜 프로퍼티가 지금 좀 쿨링되는 사인을 보이고 있다. 그래서 4월 달에 커머셜 프로퍼티 세일이 한 16% 지금 드롭해서 토탈 세일이 한 39.4 빌리언 정도 됐는데 이 디클라인 한 것이 지금 13개월 동안 계속 인크리즈 하다가 처음으로 디클라인 됩니다. 그래서 좀 그런 사인을 보이고 있지 않는가. 그동안 그래도 한 1년여 동안 커머셜 세일이 괜찮았는데 특히 주범은 지금 이자율이다. 그래서 어떤 딜은 지금 딜이 진행되고 있다가도 이자율이 올라가니까 딜이 이제 깨지는 그런 경우도 있다. 그러면서 인베스터들이 이제 이자율 때문에 이제 계산을 해보면 이제 리턴 나오는 게 힘들어지니까 그런 오퍼하기를 지금 좀 꺼려하고 있다. 그런 뉴스가 지금 들어와 있고요. 그래서 이 차트에 보면 if we take a look at this chart, we can see graphically the commercial property sales volume changed from a year earlier. Okay, so it was the beginning of the pandemic, dropped significantly. It's all decreased. And coming back to life again right after 2021, and it was a good increased, but relatively it was this much decreased and then relatively increased sharply. But now it's the first sign we see in April, minus 16%. So this is interesting phenomena right now in the commercial property sector, along with the Amazon's sublease and less demand for the warehousing the spaces. Okay, the next news is again Wall Street Journal, June 3rd. The markets think that the Fed is finally in control. Well, this is a rather we need some knowledge about the in general economy, but let's see how much we can digest from this news. Investors may be giving central banks too much credit, overblame for whatever happens inflation. Well, this article, tone of this article was, we cannot trust or we cannot rely on the Fed, the Federal Reserve, but people tend to think too much of their role, the central banks. Well, that's what at least this article says. So pessimists see a recession coming, as often happens when the Fed raises interest rate. Whereas optimists, in opposite, think the central bank can hit a sweet spot to balance inflation and economic growth. You know the sweet spot. The inflation markets appear to side with the latter, but right now a little bit of optimistic says the latter. So optimists think that the central banker can hit the sweet spot to balance inflation and economic growth. And if we jump to these numbers here, US inflation for April came in at 8.3% from the March's 8.5%. So raising hopes of a peak. So we hope it was a peak, March's 8.5% inflation rate, because April went down tiny bit, 8.3%. And well, let's see what it says here. In the period of high inflation, the central bank policy cannot be understood through rates and bond yields alone. Well, looks like we are looking into 10-year Treasury yield, the percentage, and also interest rate. But it says, the theory says, the central policy, the bank policy cannot be understood only through those two factors. That's what it says. Whether we understand or not, the popular gauge of real US financial conditions are yields on inflation-protected treasuries, called TIPS. Well, honestly, I don't know much about these TIPS, but it's inflation-protected treasuries. And in March and April, these were negative, even as regular yields combined, implying investors saw inflation going higher because they didn't find the Fed's hawkish stance aggressive enough. It sounds like they're saying the Fed was not aggressive enough. Okay, so seems to me what they're saying is a negative. This TIPS works totally. The investment protected treasury works differently. In a sense, almost opposite. If inflation goes up, instead of raising their yield, they lowered value of the bonds. Okay. Even I don't know exactly what's going on in this TIPS. So maybe later on, if someone is familiar with these TIPS, maybe we can have some a session, but that's what they're saying anyway. So conversely, higher inflation in the second half of the year, we are in now what, June, right? So if still inflation is higher in the second half of the year, could lead to exaggerated fears that this will be permanent. If this interest rate is a permanent, then it's real fear. But it's likable. That's what they're saying, because China's latest lockdowns is a clear example of how supply disruptions may still drag on. This kind of the trouble can drag on. But we never expected, or nobody's expected that China is going to lock down. Yeah, so, I mean, during the pandemic period, they were doing fine. I mean, it appeared, but later part of pandemic, they shut down. Shanghai, Hong Kong, or pretty much all the major cities. So it's kind of continued creating the problems. So the illusion of being in control can bring comfort, but it is a dangerous one. So it's hard to say anything. 지금 페드가 지금 마켓은 페드가 어느 정도 컨트롤을 하고 있다고 보는 것 같다. 그런 아티클이 지금 나와 있는데요. 우리가 레이맨으로서 이코노믹 그 펌을 뭐 잘 알지는 못하지만은 우리가 이제 계속 얘기하는 거는 뭐죠? 그 30년 고정금리, 그다음에 10-year T-bill, Treasury yield. 그거는 우리가 이제 매주 봐서 어느 정도 알겠는데, 우리가 안 본 것 중에 하나는 이 inflation protected treasury, yields on inflation protected treasury. 또 인플레이션을 이제 막을 수 있는 그런 트레저리가 또 있다는 거예요. 팁스라고 보통 부르는데 그것이 이제 네거티브였는데 그 지금 마지막에 그게 이제 포지티브로 올라섰거든요. 지금 그래서 인베스터들 생각에는 페드가 어그레시브하지를 못했다. 아니면 어그레시브한 행동이 인트레스트 레이트 올리는 게 지금 메이에서 올라갔잖아요. 그것이 더 일찍 시작을 했어야 되겠다. 이렇게 얘기를 지금 한다고 하는 그런 얘기인 것 같고요. 그런데 한 가지 지금 약간의 희망적인 뉴스는 지금 인플레이션이 3월 달에 8.5% 기록을 했는데 그거를 이제 피크라고 우리가 이제 희망하는 거죠. 왜 4월 달에 8.3%로 지금 내려왔기 때문에 아마도 사람들이 페더럴 리저브가 어느 정도 컨트롤을 지금 하고 있다고 그렇게 생각을 하는 것 같다. 그런 이제 보도가 들어온 것 같아요. 그래서 지금 이제 중간인데 middle of the year 그런데 지금 상반기에 아니라 하반기에 이자율이 어떻게 되느냐에 따라서 굉장한 또 피어가 올 수도 있다. 뭐 이게 퍼머넌트하게 되는 게 아닌가. 그게 왜 그러냐면 이제 차이나 같은 사태를 전혀 우리가 예측을 못했거든요. 셧다운하는 거를, 락다운된 거를. 그래서 지금 서플라이 디스트럭션이 계속 길어지고 있다. 뭐 이런 거. 자, 그런 뉴스가 오늘 월스트리트저널에 오늘이 아니라 이번 주에 들어와 있습니다. Okay, that's it for today's news brief. If you have any comment or any question, you can do that. Otherwise, I think we finished a little bit earlier today. Otherwise, we will see you next week.